Hello and welcome to Metra AV Tech Tips. Wow, I'm going to have to step a little bit into being framed this week.
There you go. Who are you, Brent?
I'm Brent.
I'm Adam.
I'm Brent out of frame.
You're in frame. You're
can
there.
our producer take the camera and give it just a little bit of a...
It doesn't look like you're in frame because you're behind the volume.
Well, no, when I'm standing behind the line.
Oh, yeah, look at that.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah, look at that.
Look at that.
Everybody, thank you for checking in with us today.
Could give me just a lid. No, other way. Wow. There you go.
That'll work.
I'm back in frame now.
There we go.
Hello, Adam.
Hi, Brent.
How are you, Adam?
Doing well.
We're off to an auspicious start.
We're off to a great start. So let's get some stuff out of the way first and foremost. Again, as always, everybody, thank you for checking in with today's episode today. If we are talking about something that's helpful to you.
If they're not on today's episode today, are they on today's episode tomorrow?
Possibly, because they could be looking at the recording. Oh, not yesterday.
But if today is tomorrow, today is yesterday.
Today's yesterday's tomorrow. Anyways, moving on.
I think we're here for a reason.
Yeah, okay. I don't know what that reason is, but we're here. So, thank you again for checking out today's episode. If you have questions or comments about whatever it is that we're talking about today, please leave them over here in the chat section. Or if you're viewing this after the fact, leave it down below in the comment section below. We do monitor those off air, and so we definitely will look at those. And then, of course, Brent, our series that we did...
Stop. We're not done yet. First off, what are we giving away in this series?
Well, that's where I was going. So last series we gave away the Fortune kit. By the way,
Phaetonia.
Phaetonia, please check your email. I gave you some instructions on that. So check your email. If the emails aren't getting to you for some reason, let me know. Shoot me another email to the same email you sent to. We'll get that figured out for you as well. But that worked out so well, we decided to continue it on. So for the next 3 episodes, including this one today, and, well, actually it's 4 episodes, including last week's episode, we are giving away the HDMI AIO2 as well as the CS IR-Kit CCUS to go along with it. And yeah, there they are right there. So the way to enter, of course, is leave us a comment on the episode or in the chat off to the side. Every episode gives you one new opportunity to be put into the runnings for winning that as well. So definitely leave your comments over in the chat section. If you weren't here for last week's episode, go back and watch that one after this one and leave a comment there about that. And basically how it's going to come into is we want to hear from you about that episode. Let us know. Do you have a question? Do you have a comment about what we're talking about? Leave it there as well. So we'll talk about it then there. So
Then there.
So
what is today's episode so that I'm up to speed as well?
So today's episode, we're talking about how to split an HDMI cable.
Well, based on my marriage, it ought to be pretty darn simple.
Well, and so what I've done, Brent, is I went ahead and I pulled together everything that I need to split an HDMI cable. So I've got my cutters, I've got my crimpers, I've got the strippers, right? So I'm good to go there. I have the extra head shell that's already splayed out and it's ready to go.
I see you're ready to do your splitting.
I'm ready to do the splitting. I even have, look at this, I came prepared. I have heat shrink. Right? I don't have the blower to actually shrink it down and whatnot.
There is not a single diameter joke I can make at this moment.
No. So anyways, so yeah, I'm prepped and ready to go. I even have butt connectors in here just in case. So now, Brent, I guess the next thing to do is just to do it, right? I just need to go ahead and
actually the next thing to do is to tell you to step out of frame and walk away because obviously this is not your pigeon. Because that is not how we split an HDMI cable. The first thing you're going to do is take the cable over in the corner and speak badly about its partner. And then you're going to go to the other end of the cable and speak badly about its partner.
The other partner, yeah.
And I can promise you there will be a split.
Yeah, there you go.
However, in the event that you actually need to do an electronic splitting,
yes,
that is not the correct answer.
So everything that I prepared for today's episode is wrong, is what you're saying.
So you have my job today. Okay. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions before we get into this.
Okay. What you got?
Tell me, what is our goal in splitting this HDMI cable?
Okay, so I just want to take an HDMI cable and I want to take a specific source. In this case, let's just say we have an Apple TV, which I do right here. I want to take this Apple TV and I want to show that Apple TV on 2 separate displays. I'm not going to go crazy. This isn't a bar or anything like that.
Okay,
I just have 2 TVs.
Then I'm going to ask you some questions. If we're doing this, there's a couple of things we need to know up front.
Yes.
And some of this we covered in HDMI distribution in a previous episode.
Yep.
But I'm going to ask you to do me a favor.
Yep.
You've got your black pen there.
I do.
I want you to tell me what displays we have and what resolutions they are.
Okay.
Because this is an important question before we move forward.
Yes, it is. So, what I have to work with here, and I'll go ahead and cut over to that as well, we'll make it pretty
He said he wasn't going to work today.
simple and straightforward. So I've got a Sony 1080p. We'll say it's a Bravia, right? Bravia. Great TV series, by the way. And then my second TV that I have is an LG OLED.
Ooh. So obviously you got a pay
4K.
raise.
So that's what I am working with. So Brent,
And we are sending our Apple TV there.
correct. I've got
Is
my
our
Apple TV.
4K?
It is 4K.
Oh, so you're going to add some interesting complexities into this.
I am. And in fact, I'm going to take it even a step further. Brent, I need to make sure that I have HDR on the LG TV.
Oh. So you plan on...
I just spent all this extra money. I just spent, you know, what, 5, 8, 10 grand on an OLED TV. I really want to have.
I really want to have your
The best
paycheck
picture.
is what I really want to have.
Well, the secret is you got to do YouTube stuff, and then you get to pay the big bucks.
YouTube, is that what you're calling
YouTube
it?
stuff, yeah.
Okay.
So, Phaetonia, that's exactly the point. That is the semantics of what we're talking about. They said, would the goal be to split the signal rather than to split the cable?
Yes.
And that is the deciding factor of what we're trying to do today. I just realized we don't have a picture.
Oh, yeah, where's our fancy schmancy? It's the production team's fault,
yeah,
isn't
we're
it?
going to blame them. Anyway,
But he's never done that before.
No, he hasn't. I haven't showed him how to do that. So anyways, Brent, go ahead.
Okay, well, once you get this going and step out of frame, I'll get to it. Thank you. So, hi there, everybody. So we're going to figure out what we need to do to accomplish to get this Apple TV to not just 2 televisions, but 2 televisions of different performance characteristics. Now, next question I'm going to ask you, are we doing an extender in this system?
No, we're going to keep it simple.
So we just got some nice cables.
Yep.
Okay, so we're not going to assume we have to spec in extenders or our repeaters, anything like that. We're just strictly speaking splitting. Okay.
Super straightforward.
Okay, so normally in the past, what you would do is if you have multiple televisions, you would look to set the system up to the highest common denominator. Now, highest common denominator does not mean lowest of everything. What it means is, would you switch me to, oh, never mind, I'm here. Would you switch me to overhead, sir? So let's assume in the old days we had a 720 set, a 1080 set, and those really were our options. In the old days of splitting, the best you could do was 720 because it was the highest common between all the TVs. Now, fortunately, life goes on, but we're going to start with a little background even then. If you wanted to split the signal, you came out of your source, in this case, the Apple TV unit. Would you put me back on the front camera? I lost my co-pilot. You would come out of the source into a splitter of some kind. Now, a splitter has to do a number of things. It's not just like a coax splitter where signal comes in, small amount of boosting, and it goes out to multiple TVs. There's a lot that has to go on within the splitter to work correctly. The first thing that has to happen is Edid negotiation. So you have multiple TVs, a Sony and an LG in this case, coming back to some kind of unified box that they both plug into. Now, that box is the first stop on the Edid chain from the display back. So it has to negotiate what we're doing. And that's not just resolution, color, bit rate, and audio. It's also HDCP, the security questions. A proper HDMI splitter, properly built with all the good stuff in it, will not only negotiate the EDID, but will also negotiate multiple HDCP instances simultaneously. Now, that to a large degree is determined by the source and always has been. Some sources support as few as 5 HDCP key sets, some support over 20 HDCP key sets. And the job of a splitter is to parse that. So if we have, in this case, a 1 in 4 out, or 1 in 5 out, 4 out, you have the ability to support 4 displays, or 4 AVRs, or any combination of 4 next thing down the line. Each one of those outputs will make sure that the security requirements are met, or that port will shut the system down if not. That is built into every properly managed splitter. The next thing a splitter will do and this gets mislabeled a lot in our industry, is it will provide voltage and current for the source.
Clock stretching.
Yeah, I'm going to have to hit you on that one. But we do hear a lot of that on the phone, don't we?
Yeah.
HDMI is a little weird, and we've talked about this in the past, but the way HDMI works is the input port on the HDMI device that is end of line powers the output port on the HDMI device previously in line. So assuming we have an AVR and a TV, the TV is actually powering the output of the AVR. A big issue with that is longer cables, extenders, active cables, or some TVs that just have very tiny little power supplies. There may not be enough there to properly power the output of the previous device. So somewhere somebody said, hey, put a splitter in and that fixes it. And they're right. And I don't know where it started, but somebody said, oh, it does clock stretching. And we see this on the forums, we see it online, we get it in phone calls. No, what it's doing is this is just providing proper voltage and current to power the output of the sending device. It's not clock stretching, but it is very important, and a splitter can absolutely help you with that. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. That's a good example of what the AIO does. We need to get this Apple TV to a 1080p set and a 4K set.
With HDR on the 4K
with HDR on the 4K and not on the 1080p.
Correct.
And we don't want a weird picture in the 1080p.
Right.
We want as good as we can get. So, fortunately, in the last couple of years, splitter technology has improved dramatically. In the early days, we couldn't have done a 1080p and a 4K with HDR at the same time. The best we would be able to do is 1080p. Because a splitter would look at all the inputs and say, you know, I got the highest I can get out of the front television's 1080, so the highest we're going to get out of anything is 1080. And the reason for this is a source can only do one resolution at a time. It can't output 4K and 1080. It, however, can output 4K and 4K HDR simultaneously because the HDR is metadata. So, in the old days, 1080p is the best we're going to get. I don't care what our source says. And I don't care what our best TV is. We are locked down to the worst television. All that has changed with our SPL 5 series products. We have a 1x2, a 1x4, and a 1x8.
Yes, we do.
Ooh, I'm happy I remembered that.
Yep.
So you can do some major distribution with these splitters. Now, what these splitters will now allow you to do is take your 4K HDR source, in this case, again, the Apple TV, or a Roku, or a Blu-ray player HDR, or your DirecTV satellite receiver, go into the splitter, and then each output negotiates independent of all the others. Now, depending on the splitter, there is one specific output you want to put the highest performance display on. And it does vary depending on the model. I believe on the 1x4, it's output number 1.
Yeah, on the 1x4 and the 1x8, it's output 1. On the 1x2, it's output 2. It's
just to confuse me.
Well, and the reason for that is the board itself
inverted.
is flipped upside down. So yeah.
Now, what this means to you guys is in the field, you want to put the best performing display on output number 1, which is this one.
There you go.
Output number 1. And then from there, it doesn't matter because each one of the other outputs will auto scale down to what the television's EDID replies back to the splitter with. So you can have one of the things we've done at CEDIA is a 720, a 1080, a 4K, and a 4K HDR off of a 4K HDR source, just to show that all the sets will work properly. And it's actually pretty darn amazing how good 720 looks or 1080 looks when you have a 4K source.
So, Brent, let's talk about that in aspect. Let's make it more difficult in this instance, okay? So let's take away that scaling capability. As amazing as ours is, and I'm very happy that we have ours, and I want you all to have availability to it. And if you have questions about it, reach out to your rep or to your distributor and find out pricing or capabilities, or give us a call. Of course, at our tech support line, 386-492-8584 is our tech support line. Or you can email us, of course, Adam R at metrohometheater.com.
Brent M at metrohometheater.com.
So Now, the truth of the matter is that this is probably one of the few splitter scalers that are out there that does such a good job. And that's not just because I like patting my own back about it, but honestly, we haven't been able to find one that does it as well. So let's take that into account. Let's go back to concepts then and talk about the idea of actually splitting something. And let's talk more about what you were saying before about the highest common denominator.
Okay.
And how we need to work around that. So if I have, again, we've got our Sony 1080p, we've got our LG 4K, but I have a 1080p source, then it doesn't really matter. I put a splitter on that and everything's hunky-dory. I'm not going to get anything higher anyways because of the source. Now, what about when I have a 4K device? What happens then?
Well, when you have a 4K device going into a system that doesn't have 4K capability, the Edid will knock it down. And a good example of this is, let's go clothes shopping.
Yep.
Now, I have reached a point in my life when I can no longer fit into a 34-inch waist.
Sure.
So I can just walk right past that section of Wrangler jeans at Target.
Yep.
Because I don't even have to look at those and say, do I want, I can't.
It doesn't matter. You wouldn't be able to do it anyways.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So I go straight to the large old guy side, the relaxed ones. I mean, it's amazing. Just like with your television, you start to break things down to much more defined. So it's the relaxed fit, 36, 32.
Yep.
And then you take whatever colors are available and you're pretty much done.
Yeah.
Edid works the same way. So it will look at your displays. And again, we're going to complicate this, as he said. I've got a 1x4 and I've got an old 32-inch somewhere in the kitchen.
Yep.
That's 720. And then I've got 1080s around the house. You know what? I'm going to make life really miserable.
Ooh.
I've got
You've got a 4K projector is what you have.
Oh.
You have a 4K BenQ projector. I just want to make your life difficult.
I can see that.
I'm just saying. I mean, if I'm paying to have you come in and do work for me, I'm not going to make it easy. I'm just.
What AV are you giving me?
I'll give you a Sony.
Okay.
Okay.
That's actually a plus.
Yeah.
So I've got these sets, and if I have a standard splitter, just non-scaling splitter, you know what the best picture I'm going to get when the 720 TV's turned on?
Well, 4K obviously, right? Because I've got my 4K BenQ.
No. As soon as, let's say I'm watching the 4K BenQ, and my AVR, now it's great, and I actually have a splitter that does 4K, and my Sony does 4K, and my source does 4K.
Yep.
And I've got the BenQ turned on, and man, life is great. I'm watching 4K HDR Grand Tour. They're going across Vietnam in those big boats, going through the hydrillas. Life is wonderful.
Right.
Until somebody else in the house turns on one of those other TVs. If they turn on a 1080p set, guess what happens to the entire system?
So even if so you're saying then if I have a 4K source, a 4K splitter that's capable of 4K, 4K display, 4K AVR, all that kind of good stuff. If I have all of that set up and I don't have any of the other TVs that are lower resolution, I can get 4K?
If they're not turned on.
If they're turned off?
They're turned off.
So long as the hot plug has released as well?
If it's an older 1080p set, it probably has.
Okay.
So everything's fine right now as long as the only thing I'm doing is the BenQ.
Okay.
So I've got 4K on a traditional splitter. As soon as I turn on one of those 1080 sets, and let's say one of those 1080 sets is a Samsung.
Yep.
Guess what happens to the system?
We renegotiate, everything blacks out for a moment, and we come back in, and now we've got 1080p.
And that's not all we have. What else do we have on a Samsung HDMI input on an older 1080p set?
Oh, good question. Are we using an ARC input? Or are we using...
We have 2-channel audio.
Ah, this is true. This is very true.
So we have now dropped our great 4K HDR, really awesome multi-channel audio in the theater.
I've got Dolby Atmos with that one because I'm watching my my Apple Plus or whatever it is that they're using now.
At this point, we are now going down to a 1080p picture in the theater, 2-channel audio.
Brent, why did I spend all that money?
Well, first off, we really need to talk about your paycheck. Because you have way too much if you have this.
Well, if I have to hire you, I'm getting paid too much.
Wouldn't you just be able to afford the second Apple TV and stop?
Well, you would think that would be the case, but a lot of people like to share, and here's why. Let's say we're watching a movie in the theater, and I'm done with the theater, I want to go to bed.
Are we watching something?
Not together, we're not.
Just checking.
You worry me. So I am watching in the theater Grand Tour on Amazon Prime because I'm that guy. But now I'm done in the theater. I want to go to the bedroom. Now, when I turn off the BenQ and just turn on one of these, no big deal.
Sure.
Life is perfect. But let's say I may go to the I'm going back and forth between the bedroom or the living room and the kitchen. And I've got that old 720 set. As soon as I turn that 720 on, all of this now goes to 720.
Yeah.
And if the theater's still on, it's still at 720.
Right.
Because a source can only do one thing at a time.
Sounds like you need 3 Apple TVs.
But you can't sync all 3 Apple TVs up to the same place at the same time.
Can't.
That's why you want the splitter. Cable boxes, direct TVs, sources that are being shared throughout the house, particularly if it's not a big family that everybody has their own, splitters are a great solution.
So William, and actually backing up a couple things here, FWT, good to see you as well. It's always great to see you on the chat. And then of course Faetonia and William, of course as well. It's great to see you. Thank you for the comments and questions. FWT is asking, question for you later, have you spoken in the past about your HDMI emergency kit? We have not. And that is a whole thing to come. So reach out to your reps and to your distributors and whatnot about this kit. Because this is going to have a collection of our repair tools, our AIO, the Junior, the Edid blocker, the SP3, and I think even the GA1 and the GA2 are in here as well.
Yes.
But we will be doing a whole topic discussion on this as well. So, but still reach out to your rep about this. We're doing a really great deal on that. So reach out to them and find out pricing and whatnot.
And it fixes a lot of stuff. Sadly, it cannot fix what you're seeing here with the traditional
for the
splitter.
Scaling. Now, Faetonia is he's commenting that he goes to Target and buys the relaxed Wranglers as well. So
thank you.
You've got you have a kindred spirit. And then William's asking, hello all. When talking older TV, in quotes, what years of release are we talking? So rather than talking years, so not so much
Let's
like
feature sets.
This is a Jeep Wrangler from a 2000. It's a TJ, so it's 96 to 06. It's not quite that. We're more talking feature sets. So even today, you can go out and buy a 1080p TV from Samsung and Sony and whoever else. It's just, usually it's a smaller size. It's a 32-inch or something else.
Yeah, there's still 720s out there.
There's still 720s out there. Now, so what we're talking is less about, when we say older TVs, we are really actually talking about older
chipsets.
Versions and chipsets, because those new TVs that are released that are 1080p are still
1.4 chipsets.
1.4 chipsets or 2.0 chipsets. Well, no, sorry, that's 4K. 1.4 chipsets. And so it's not so much that they're old, they're just old chipsets. That's all we're really talking about.
Even if it's a 1.4 chipset, not a 1.3, not a 1.2, not even a 1.1. If it's a 1.4 chipset, it's still going to be effectively, yes, there are some 1.4 chipset 4Ks, first gens, but not very many, and they don't support HDR. So if we're looking at anything under a 1.4 chipset rule, which is 720, 480, 1080p, and early non-HDR 4K, that's all in a 1.4 chipset. So the feature sets are fairly defined. 2.0 chipset is when we added the HDR and the deep color. You could support Atmos under 1.4.
Yeah, it was like backwards compatible for 1.4.
But the HDR is not. So if we have an older splitter, something that does not have auto scaling and Edid management built into it, whatever the highest resolution of the lowest resolution set is, if you follow that, is what everybody's going to do. Whatever the best audio any set can do, and if it's only 2-channel on one TV in the whole house, everybody's on 2-channel. Now, fortunately, life has changed with our SPL5s. You can also do a little bit of EDID management, even on the old splitters, where you could set, to minimize negotiations. Every time you turn a TV set on, they all kind of blip off, and it has to start over and say, okay, what are you, who are you? And it's not just with that one set, it has to renegotiate every set.
Well, because then at that point, the smart aspect of a splitter is taking all of that information from all of its sources and finding out. Yeah, because it has to find out and collect all of that and say, okay, all these TVs are here, but what can everybody see? Can everybody see 4K? No, because this TV over here, or these 3 TVs can't see 4K.
Correct.
Can they see 1080? Well, not everyone, except for this one TV down here, can see 1080. This one TV is 720. So guess what? We're doing 720. Now let's do the same thing with audio. Can everybody get Atmos? Well, most of them can get, well, actually none of them get Atmos, well, except for one.
The AVR.
The AVR can get Atmos. Okay, so then we're not going to do Atmos. So then let's bump it down again. Can we do Dolby Digital Plus? And it asks again.
No.
Nope. Then it goes through and asks again, and Samsung and all that kind of stuff. And then we get all the way down to stereo. It goes through that filtering process.
And that's literally what it is. It's a no, 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 yes. And whatever the best yes is, that's what you got.
Yeah.
Now, fortunately, with the new splitters and the scaling and the EDID management built in, we can now negotiate HDCP 2.0, 2.2, 2.1, going backwards. And by the way, HDCP numbers do not match HDMI numbers.
Correct. So HDCP 2.3 is the current.
Right.
However, it's HDMI 2.1, which is what we're using.
Yeah. So don't confuse the two of those.
Yeah.
So it negotiates each of those, and it allows, on a proper EDID management splitter, it can negotiate all the different versions simultaneously. So if we've got the 720 set, which is, HDMI 1.3 chipset probably, and HDCP 1. Something probably, that will be negotiated on its correct port, whatever port you select other than one, and the same thing on both of these. So everything happens correctly. And it's happening a little faster than it used to. Splitters used to take a while, and you would come out of a splitter, let's be honest, in most cases splitters were in the bedroom and the bathroom because you had a cable box, or in a church or a bar or a sporting venue.
Yep.
Where you're supporting multiple TVs. In sporting venues, the ability to do the scaling is an absolute must.
Like sports bars and
nobody
restaurants
buys
and whatnot.
all new TVs at the same time.
Yep. No. Well, when you first open up, you just bought all these TVs, and that's great because you've got the investment in it. But a year or two down the road, when one TV goes out, you're not going to go out and buy.
It's different.
25 new TVs. Yeah. So let's see. We got a comment from FWT. Do you have a rep list for each region? FWT, if you see there, we made a comment. Thank you again, Brandon, for doing that for me. There's a phone number there. That is the phone number to get you into the sales department. Once you call that number there, they will be able to filter you through to whoever you need to talk to in there. Depending on where you are in the U.S., they will get you to the person you need to talk to.
I will say that Adam and I have a much easier job than sales does.
Yeah, we get to fix problems. Yeah. Sales gets to make money. So that's...
Well, no, based on what you're telling me you have in your house.
Side money.
Oh,
yeah. I moonlight.
I don't have a Sony AVR and BenQ 4K HDR projector in my house.
Yeah, no. I just haven't told you that I've won the lottery yet. That's all it comes down to.
You and Matt Good.
There we go, yeah. Now, then we also have from Randall. He's saying, another thing to watch out for is the input port used on the TV.
Yes!
That's very true. Now, there's more to his comment. He says, when using an HDMI distribution amplifier with downscaling, some TVs only have full bandwidth 600 megahertz pixel clock on port number 1. I'm glad you put some in there, because the truth is that most of what you're running into isn't so much that it's allowing for that much, it's what that port is capable of physically, because of course we have so many problems with bandwidth that even inside the TV, the traces inside of the TV, the best way to show...
You want to do the drawing, you want me to do it?
I was going to say that, so the best way to talk about this is actually to show it. So when you are dealing with the traces inside the TV...
Trace equalization is very important.
And what he means by trace equalization, we're not talking about Star Trek topics in here either. What happens is you have port, here's we're going to do just a 3-port setup here. So here is the HDMI chipset here on the board. Now you'll notice that the pathways from port number 1 and port number 3 are roughly about the same because they're going to come in here and they're going to go like this. Now there's a problem, however, or actually we'll talk about this here because now port number 2, that's a very direct route. Now you'll notice that there's a couple things going on here. This is that racetrack effect. When you have the outside lane of a racetrack, it's actually that much longer than in the inside track. And so the reason that or the problems that you run into with different ports, it's not always port number 1. You'll actually find that primarily it's port 2, or if it's a 4-port system, it'll be port 2 or port 3. I just had this conversation with another engineer where we were talking about this, that it's Vizio of all the companies does a really great job of showing you which is the best port to go to plug it into, because they'll actually label it, good, good, better, and then they'll say, okay, well, this is the best one. And normally, a lot of times, it's also the ARC or eARC port as well. So what you're running into, Randall, is what you're running into with I just saw FWT's comment. You need to change your name, and you need to watch your comments. I'm not allowed to say stuff on air. No, it's not easy. The side hustle is not easy. But anyway, so
is this how you're buying stuff?
Yeah, right. So when you look at this, what you're running into is this trace equalization. So when you have information from the HDMI cable coming in on this is actually going to be D0 here, and then D1, D2, and D3. When you have information coming in on D3, it's making it here to the chipset faster than D0 is making it to the chipset because of this curve out here. So what engineers will have to do is instead, they'll have the outside come in like this, and the next one will come in, it'll go like this, and then it'll do this weird little thing because this here makes it the same length as this run here. And as you get closer and closer, you'll notice that there's more of that happening the further in that it gets before it finally gets to the chipset itself.
But even with trace equalization, there can be a problem because the tighter you make the wiggles,
Yep.
the greater the chance of dropping data and having timing errors.
Yeah.
Electrons don't like to make turns.
Yeah, no, they don't, which is surprising because it's
Very tiny.
very tiny, and it's a wave and it's a particle. Wait, or is that just light? Are electrons the same way?
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. So that's what you're running into. Now, you're not wrong. A lot of times it is still port 1. That just means that port 1 is the most direct to that input, or they've put extra time and energy into making sure that that works that way.
It's typically the most direct.
Typically.
Now, you know, through the years, we've, like Panasonic, port number 2.
Yep.
Traditional 1080p Samsung's port number 2.
Yep.
The One Connect boxes
Yep.
on Samsung, typically port number 3.
Yeah.
Now, we say typically because they're not all identical.
No, and in fact, even from even within the same series of televisions, they may use a slightly different HDMI board inside of each one. So you could have on one size of TV in a series, it could be port number 2, and then on the next size of that series, it could be port number 1 is the best port. It really just, it varies.
And unfortunately, you don't find this out till you find this out. And this is one of those things that I actually have gotten some, you know, when I first proposed this to other techs, it's like, yeah, that's not true. And it took a lot of testing and reality to, yeah, it is true.
We ran into that on a tech call last week using one of our matrices, actually. So you're not wrong about the distribution amplified systems, matrices or splitters or whatnot. They can have, it's not necessarily that they have a weaker signal, it's just they already have touched the HDMI signal, which means that there could have been some kind of added effect happening on that signal, because when they would go directly from the source to the display, no problem. Everything showed up great, no problems whatsoever. And that goes into one of your famous discussions or instructions, the $100 bills discussion, which we should get into.
You know what is it? What, I don't have one with me today.
You don't have one with you
You
today.
got a $100 bill in your pocket?
Let's see what I've got in my pocket. I think I got $1. Will that work?
By no means is this a $100 bill.
No, it's $1. It's what I got. I spent it all on the Sony AVR and the BenQ projector and the LG.
Now
and
that
all,
I believe.
There you go.
For years, anybody that ever attended my class, when we talked about extenders and cables and inputs, when you look at HDMI, the variance from point A to point B in an HDMI system over the feeds is 6/100ths of an inch variance between D0, D1, D2, and D3. Now the thing about this is 6/100ths of an inch is the thickness of $6 bills, which sounds like a lot. And when you fold it in half and then you fold it again and you look at it, it's like, well, that's not super thin and that's not bad, except that most products on the market take 4/100ths of an inch each, and their rationale is, well, the other guys are doing it better so we can cheat and it doesn't cost us as much.
Right.
This is my dollar, right?
I guess, yeah.
So if you've got 3 devices, a cable box, an AVR, and a TV, or Roku AVR TV, whatever it is, before we even add in extenders, splitters, cables, anything else, we're already actually out of spec because we're at 12/100ths of an inch. So it all adds up. We talk about timing errors. Timing is incredibly critical within HDMI. So when you get a splitter, you want to get a splitter where they put time and money into the board, not just the cheapest splitter you can buy on Amazon.com, because they're not putting the time and the effort into doing it correctly. They can't.
Yep.
And we're not even talking about the feature sets like EDID management, EDID copy, or the scaling. Now, the EDID copy on our scaler with the auto, the copy, and the mixed.
Yep.
This is an absolute lifesaver because it will do some amazing things for you. First off, you do have the scaling built in. But you do want to use the EDID management correctly. And I'm going to leave this one at him because it is absolutely his pigeon.
So and what Brent's talking about, of course, is on the front of the unit, we actually have the switch where we can go between them. Now, on the mixed and the auto, that's acting as if it's a basic switch. Or a splitter. It's doing kind of the same thing where you're taking for the auto port, or sorry, with the mixed portion of it, it acts as a traditional splitter, and where it's taking the combination of all of the displays and finding the highest common denominator. Auto is instead saying, I'm going to do scaling for those displays. This is just a 4K display, telling the source that it's a 4K display. So then, of course, copy is doing what Brent's talking about, where we're actually taking the EDID information from port number 1, whatever display is on port on the output number 1, and we're copying that EDID back to the source. Now, this can actually solve quite a few problems
because first off, it speeds things up.
Yeah, because we don't have to worry about any kind of
no negotiation,
no thought process happening. It just kind of sends it. Then we can also have some displays are looking for a callback from the source. That's the only way that I have to describe that right now. I'm still doing research on it myself. In order for it to work correctly, I don't know if it's an HDCP issue or what, but that TV is looking for that. A certain company does that I don't want to call out just yet. But by having it copy the EDID
the
instead,
company that also tracks error detection.
Amrung. Well, it rhymes with Amrung. It's the only way I found it. Anyways, but by copying the EDID of that TV, because that TV was already the highest common denominator of all, or it was the highest capable TV out of all of the ones that were there, by copying the EDID of that TV back to the source device, now all of a sudden everything started working. All the other TVs were working fine before this. Just that one TV would not show a picture. But as soon as we copied the EDID from that back to the source, it started working perfectly fine.
Because it set the source up for the trickiest TV of the bunch.
Yeah.
And as soon as you throw HDMI 2.0 4K HDR into the mix, you're dealing with multiple chipsets within the devices, and it does become very complex in how both the EDID and the metadata is handled.
Yeah. Now, going back to what we were talking about before about the matrix and the problems we were running into with that is when you go from the source device to the matrix, as much engineering, as much QC as we put into it, there's going to be variances in the wiring inside. So that timing is going to be off somewhere, somehow. As much as we want it to be perfect, where no matter what, it just looks transparent to the signal, unfortunately it doesn't happen that way. So by going from the matrix then to the display is also having its own trace equalization issues inside of it because it's going into one that has all the curves and hasn't been done right. But when they bypass the matrix, it goes in there and it works fine. That's where the dollar effect comes in, where the thickness that's there is already being taken up before it even gets to the TV chipset.
So it's not that one specific product is the fault.
Right.
It's the system.
It's the combination of the system. So that's why we say go for the best trace equalization input on the display, which, Randall, like you were saying, a lot of times is input 1. We find that it's inputs 2 or inputs 3, or if you're using a Vizio, it'll actually just straight up tell you which one's the best input.
This also means you may have to change inputs on your AVR or your matrix to find the best combination for that gear.
They do the same thing as well. You may have 6 HDMI inputs on the matrix. You may find that inputs 3 and 4 are the best inputs on the matrix.
And by the way, do not assume that's on every job, and here's why. When you look at a cable, so we've got a cable, we've got a splitter, we've got a source, and maybe an AVR, plus the display. So all these devices are in there in the chain. Now the thing is with this, from production build to production build, any one of those traces could get affected by humidity, by temperature, by solder temp, the quality of the bath, any impurities in the bath. All of these things factor in every time, and then there's the assembly of the cable. As careful as we have our cable assemblies made, there still will be variances. So let's assume we've got a slight variance on this one on blue. Let's assume that our variance here is slightly on green. They're not compounding each other.
No, because there's two separate
Right.
runs inside.
Now, this one is either the clock or red.
Okay.
Again, we still have room to operate within here, and because these are not compounding on top of each other, we're not failing.
In fact,
But
they're bringing themselves back
to
into sync.
equalization.
Yeah, just on that.
But let's say we've got a problem in blue here. We've got a problem in blue here. We may not have a problem in blue here and here, but the two of these together is enough to kick it over. Now, this is not at fault. This is not at fault. It's the combination of the two pieces that's causing the failure. So nobody's wrong. They're just not right.
Everybody's having problems, and so
Right. And everybody's within spec. They're all certified. Every one of the products is built to the HDMI specification.
There's
There's just enough allowance in there.
That's a funny word, specifications.
Yeah.
Especially when you put it in lines with,
Yes,
with certain
with
organizations.
HDMI.
Yeah. Anyways, without getting us into trouble. We actually have a comment here from FWT. He's saying, what is the typical symptom call you get and find out that it's a cheap splitter that the installer has purchased? So we try to get to that before we get too far into troubleshooting. A lot of times what we'll do, actually that's usually what starts off the tech call is, what product is there? So somebody calls in and says, hey, I've got a TV that when I go through the matrix, which is then going out to a splitter, which does happen, and then these two TVs are hooked up to the splitter, one TV is working, one is not. So we're going to back up entirely and we're going to say, okay, we need make and model of your source device, your matrix, your splitter, and the TVs that they are going to. We want to know the whole layout of the system. So usually before we even get to the part of spending extra time and hours. Now, of course, I say normally it does happen where we have skipped something or have been given wrong information and we spent...
Or inadequate information.
Inadequate information.
Which is typically more the case.
Yeah, that's usually it. And we've been on the call now for hours and
then
possibly
find out
days.
there's a punch down block.
And find out there's a punch down block or find out that there's a cheap Amazon splitter. So yeah, it does happen, unfortunately, but usually we try to catch that beforehand because that's usually one of the first things that we ask about.
And the problem with HDMI, determining the cause by the symptom is very hard because the symptoms come down to no picture, HDCP not supported,
Sparkles.
mode out of range. Sparkles is an easy one.
Yeah.
Sparkles is an easy one. Color shifts.
Yep.
Weird resolutions.
Overlays of colors, so
Yep.
like a purple or a pink overlay.
And the problem is, any one of those things can be caused by any one of the
Well, and we've tried to put together like a sheet that
because
says...
we get asked frequently,
Yeah.
can you give me a what repair tool do we use for what problem?
Yeah.
No. No, I can't.
We've worked on the idea of putting together a instead of a this thing fixes this problem or this problem is fixed by this device. We're trying rather to put together a worksheet that you work through rather than say specifically yes this fixes that, because unfortunately that's not really
It's
how
HDMI.
Yeah, that's HDMI. So Brent, we're kind of getting up to. Go
Are
ahead.
we?
Yeah, we're getting ready to go ahead and close it off now at this point.
Awesome. Well, there's certainly a lot more to learn on splitters. And guys, don't hesitate to call us.
Yeah.
We are happy to be here to help you. We would much prefer you call us before you do your job design
Yeah.
instead of after when there's a problem.
So I was really excited. I really wanted to use the
What
cutters
the-
that I have here and the split and the strippers. And so you're telling me that everything that we did today, everything I prepped for, I did not need.
No, that would have been last week's episode on bulk wire and terminations.
That would have been that episode. I should have had this for all that stuff.
Was
there.
that the episode when you forgot to put the "we're filming" sign on until after the filming was done?
Oh yeah, that was great. Yeah, and then I walked out and put it up.
Put
yeah.
it up.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody, thank you so much for checking in with us today. Brent, what did you have? You have anything extra?
Yeah, actually, I was. Active cables. If you're using fiber that comes with power supplies, use the power supplies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And why are we using power supplies, Adam?
Well, we're ensuring that all of the burden of the power is taken off of whatever device the HDMI cable is plugged into. Because even as much as we say, oh yeah, throw a splitter in there because that's going to help solve a power issue, it's not meant to be a power supply for the HDMI cable.
The less things we have in line, the better off we are.
Right, exactly. So go ahead and use, if it has the option for an external power supply, use an external power supply. Don't plug it into the TV. Don't plug it into the source device. Don't plug it in
And why not?
anywhere else, because those are usually lying to you about how much power they actually have available.
Yeah, they're typically 250 to 400 milliamps on a good day downhill.
Yep. Pretty much.
So, on that happy note, I'm Brent.
I'm Adam.
And one last thing, don't cut your wires too short.
Yep.
Reboot off.
Reboot early, reboot often,
Turn off CEC.
and call tech support.
Have a great week.
Had me all backwards. It had it all kinds of screwed up. So thanks everybody.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to put your comments down below or over in the chat so you get a chance to win those pieces. We'll see y'all next time.